Hi guys, so today I am back and I'm going to do another reading of, hi, welcome everyone. I'm going to do another reading of the book that I've been reading on this channel. It's called The Atlantean Conspiracy. And I just want to say, like, before I begin, one thing is if you've missed part of the reading and you want to go back and hear it, I also upload all of my streams onto YouTube. And so my YouTube channel is Kumquat Kelly, so exactly the same as my name here, so feel free to look over that, subscribe if you'd like. So I like to read these books. Some of it can be a little bit controversial. Oh, hi Martin Art. For instance, this one right now is talking about secret societies and how they have infiltrated a lot of establishments as elite people in politics, in entertainment, etc. And how these, like, brotherhoods really, they cheat the system. They cheat the system, and they make it, not only do they exploit people, they also make it, like, very unfair to even, you know, play in the system yourself. And so this particular section, I want to, like, tiptoe around it. I want to say I don't agree with every single thing in this book, okay? I'm reading it because I think it's important to be able to look at information objectively, not silence information just because it makes you, like, oh, it makes me infuriated, but to actually be able to have a conversation about it. So this part of the book is talking about Zionists and how in this brotherhood it oftentimes does act like a secret society and so on. If you're interested in that, I will be posting last week's explanation of that on my YouTube channel in just a few days. So that'll be there this week. I also want to mention I am part Jewish myself. I am not a self-hating person, but I think it is important to talk about some of the terrible crimes that many people in the Zionist movement have done in Palestine, just in history. I think it's important to note, and that does not negate the horrors that happened of the Holocaust. It does not. So I just want to start that as a, you know, little warning. Just want to put that forward before we begin. How am I doing? I'm doing very well. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys engaging. Put any comments, questions, opinions in the comment section. I'll engage with you. And other than that, I'm just going to dive in. Okay. When exploring this issue, there's a very fine line between exposing Jewish supremacism and sounding like a supremacist yourself. I want to mention one thing. In the last video, this book talked about some of the really supremacist things that are found in the Talmud, and it had great primary sources of where to find everything. Oh, nice to meet you guys. How am I doing? Very well. I am reading, guys, if you're just joining right now, I'm reading from the book The Atlantean Conspiracy. So feel free to put any comments you'd like. Between correctly identifying the tribal Talmudic culprits and falsely pigeonholing the spiritual Torah innocence, between exposing the lies of the Holocaust and remaining sympathetic to the actual victims, the New World Order is largely a Jewish Zionist conspiracy, but it is not all Jews and it's not only Jews. There are plenty of anti-Zionist and anti-NWO Jews, but at the highest level, their religion has absolutely been hijacked by a cabal of wealthy, evil, supremacist megalomaniacs bent on world domination. You guys, if you're like, that seems really bizarre, why would you even say that? Oh, I'm good, Injection Gal. Watch the last YouTube video I will be posting this week about this. And again, I don't agree with everything in this book, okay? I'm just reading for what it says. Okay, here's the next subheading. False flags and the Hegelian dialectic. False flags are covert operations, usually conducted by governments or corporations, which are made to appear as though performed by another entity. For instance, when Israel attacked the USS Liberty in order to blame it on Egypt, or when the USS Maine was blown up to blame on Cuba or Spain. False flags are used disturbingly often and effectively through the implementation of the Hegelian dialectic. Oh, thanks, Kanji. And this is a quote from H.L. Mencken. The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary, end quote. And here's a quote from Richard Falk forward. There is no excuse at this stage of American development for a posture of political innocence, including an unquestioning acceptance of the good faith of our government. After all, there has been a long history of manipulated public beliefs, and especially in matters of war and peace. Historians are increasing agreement that the facts were manipulated, one, in the explosion of the USS Maine to justify the start of the Spanish-American War in 1898. Two, with respect to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor to justify the previously unpopular entry into World War II. Three, in the Gulf of Tonkin incident of 1964, used by the White House to justify the dramatic extension of the Vietnam War to North Vietnam. And most recently, four, to portray Iraq as harboring a menacing arsenal of weaponry of mass destruction in order to justify recourse to war in defiance of international law and the United Nations. Oh, thanks, Emily Bridges. I'm doing very well, thanks. Guys, if you're just coming right now, I'm reading from the book, The Atlantean Conspiracy. So that was the end quote from Richard Falk. And I do want to mention that if you have never heard, if you think that the Americans had gone into the war with the Middle East with pure intentions, I highly recommend you watching the movie Vice about Dick Cheney. And it drops some heavy truths, and America doesn't look so good if you watch that movie. Okay, and I want to say one thing. I think a lot of Americans can think, you know, when we think of China, we think of Russia, we can like picture these really corrupt governments. It's not too hard, you know, because we've been told, you know, communist is all bad. And I would say in many situations when it's been, you know, attempted in our, you know, world, it has had really bad results, and it's always led to disparity between the rich and the poor, which is not the concept of communism. However, we see that in quote-unquote capitalist and democratic societies as well. We have that elite. We have that 1% that controls the wealth. And I know people are very easily, they can find the hypocrisy and the control in like some of those other countries, but they're so blindsided by this happening in their own country. This happens all the time in the US. The fact that every single presidential candidate that we have to vote for is one of the elite, almost all of them, no, I'm going to say 99% of them belong to secret societies that are so interwebbed with each other. Just goes to show we do not have democracy in the US. We don't. We don't get to have some guy named Jim run for president and actually think he's going to win. He won't. He won't. There's no way that's ever going to happen because the elite can't control Jim. You know, it's not going to happen. Okay. First, a problem is created and designed to elicit a certain reaction out of the public. Then the people demand something be done about the problem and willingly accept the pre-planned NWO solution. A solution that always involves actions or legislation that never would have passed under normal circumstances. Oh, this is a good one. This is a good one. I'm going to just say, example, universal mandatory vaccinations. That could easily happen using a Hegelian dialectic, aka this pandemic, you know? Just a thought. I'm just saying, if it gets to the point in America where mandatory vaccinations are a thing, just understand this. If this pandemic had never happened or had never been exploited, never in America would we have ever been forced to get vaccinated if we did not want to, okay? So just keep that in mind as we move forward in, you know, the next few years, just how politics might change based on that, okay? So here's a quote by Paul Joseph Watson. It says, "It works like this. The manipulating body covertly creates a problem and then directs the media to incessantly focus on it without recourse. Remember, you only need to control the top of the pyramid. Most media coverage is an exercise in regurgitating what the big newspapers and TV stations are reporting. The problem could be anything: a war, a financial collapse, a rash of child abductions, or a terrorist attack. The power of the media can create the false perception that a big problem exists, even if it doesn't. Once you have created this problem, you make sure that an individual, a group, or an aspect of society is blamed. This then rallies the population behind the desperate lunge for a solution to the problem. Something must be done, they cry in unison. The people that created the problem in the first place then come back in and offer the solution that the people demand. Remember, the people screaming for a solution do not know that the problem was artificially created in the first place. The solution to the problem is always a further curtailment of freedom and an advancement of one or more aspects of the New World Order agenda, whether that is geopolitical expansion, new laws, or the implementation of new societal worldviews, end quote. Oh, thanks, guys. Guys, if you're just coming into the stream right now, I'm reading from the book, The Atlantean Conspiracy. Please feel free to put comments however you want. This is a quote from Alex Jones. The Hegelian dialectic of problem-reaction-solution. Attack yourself, blame your enemies, and tell the public you can protect them if they give up their freedoms, end quote. Next subheading, the Lusitania and World War I. Quote from Gary Allen. The same crowd which manipulated the passage of the income tax and the Federal Reserve System wanted America in the war. J.P. Morgan, John D. Rockefeller, Colonel House, Jacob Schiff, Paul Warburg, and the rest of the Jekyll Island conspirators were all deeply involved in getting us involved. Guys, if you're not familiar with the Jekyll Island conspirators, this was a meeting that was held in the early, I believe it was the 20th century, if I'm not mistaken. It was discussed on a past reading one or two ago, and basically involved a bunch of billionaires that were in the financial sector coming together and conspiring to create the Federal Reserve. And they also, work together in other things to basically have just more control of the monetary system. All right, so they were deeply involved in getting us involved with World War I. Many of these financiers had loaned England large sums of money. In fact, J.P. Morgan and Company served as British financial agents in this country during World War I, end quote. I also want to say, banks love wars. They love it, and I'll tell you why. Because they fund the wars. And they don't really care who wins oftentimes. It depends whether or not they're, if those politics would assist them in the future. But in many wars in history, they don't really care who wins, because they can fund both sides, and either way, both sides have to pay them back, and they add interest, and it's just the whole thing. Oh, thanks, guys. Yeah, so banks always win with war. They always win. World War I officially began on June 28, 1914, when members of the Illuminati Black Hand secret society assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Europe quickly polarized and warred for nearly a year before Americans were given their false flag reason to join. On May 1, 1915, the British naval cruiser Lusitania was scheduled for Liverpool, taking off from New York Harbor loaded with 600 tons of explosives, 6 million pounds of ammunition, 1,248 cases of shrapnel shells, other war materials, and last but not least, American passengers. The German embassy in D.C. was fully aware of the war materials being shipped into England on the Lusitania and tried to warn American travelers. German embassy officials attempted to place full-page ads in 50 U.S. newspapers reading, quote, "Notice, travelers intending to embark on the Atlantic voyage are reminded that a state of war exists between Germany and her allies, and Great Britain and her allies. Travelers sailing in the war zone on ships of Great Britain do so at their own risk," end quote. Oh, thanks, Chevron Amethyst. Due to actions taken by the U.S. State Department, 49 of those 50 newspapers never ran the ad. We have another quote right here by Gary Allen. The German government took out large ads in all the New York papers warning potential passengers that the ship carrying munitions and telling them not to cross the Atlantic on it. Yet the sinking of the Lusitania was used by clever propagandists to portray the Germans as inhuman slaughterers of innocents. Submarine warfare was manufactured into a cause célèbre to push us into war, end quote. Midday, May 7th, off the coast of Ireland, the Lusitania was ordered to reduce speed, and Juno, its British military escort vessel, was ordered to withdraw. Committee of 300, 33rd degree Freemason, and Lord of the Admiralty Winston Churchill knew German U-boats were in the vicinity and purposely called off Juno, leaving the Lusitania a sitting duck. Here's a quote from Jim Mars. British Commander Joseph Kenworthy, on duty when the ship was sunk, later revealed that her military escort was withdrawn at the last minute, and her captain ordered to enter at reduced speed an area where a German U-boat was known to be operating. It is clear why Germany attacked this ship, and Britain wouldn't have done the same if U.S. munitions were being shipped to Germany. The Germans whose torpedoes struck the liner were the unwitting accomplices or victims of a plot probably concocted by Winston Churchill, concluded author Simpson, end quote. Here's a quote from Fritz Springmeier. The Lusitania was a ploy. It was packed with some Morgan-owned ammunition, had been given over to England as a member of the Navy, and despite the warnings of the Germans, was sent into a naval war zone, specifically to be a target, the catalyst for America's entrance into the war. Churchill ordered the Lusitania's naval escort to return to port, and the fated ship was left unprotected to be sunk. Rothschild's agent, Colonel House, probably knew of this plot. Records point to a discussion of it between him and Sir Edward Grey of England. Historian Colin Simpson called the sinking of the Lusitania the foulest act of willful murder ever committed on the seas, end quote. Oh, hi, Devil Niraj. Guys, if you're just joining the stream right now, I'm reading from the book The Atlantean Conspiracy. Feel free to put anything in the comment sections, questions, opinions, whatever. Churchill's fellow committee of 300 members, CFR founder and Rothschild agent Colonel Mandel House, was also President Wilson's top political advisor. Wilson said, quote, "Mr. House is my second personality. He is my independent self. His thoughts and mine are one. If I were in his place, I would just do as he suggested," end quote. This is a man who has also been called the Henry Kissinger of his day. In the book, The Intimate Papers of Colonel House, is a conversation recorded between Colonel House and the Foreign Secretary of England, Sir Edward Grey. Grey asked, quote, "What will America do if the Germans sink an ocean liner with American passengers on board?" And House answered, "I believe that a flame of indignation would sweep the United States, and that by itself would be sufficient to carry us into the war." Just as luck would have it, that is exactly what happened. Around 1,200 were killed, including 128 Americans.